one of the places where obviously we're not completely lined up is sort of the Trump stuff and the reaction to all of this. I think as human beings, I don't think it particularly matters to either one of us what those differences might be, but I know our audiences have a little bit of a different feeling on that, perhaps. So my general feeling, again, I did not vote for Trump. I voted for Gary Johnson. I would have preferred having a president who I think really understands three branches of government and the history of America and all of those simple things, and that would have been nice in the debates if anyone would have said to him, do you know what the difference between the legislative and executive and judicial branches are? And I think that maybe could have caused an implosion of the whole thing and all that. But that being said, I think the wrecking ball that he put through the machine that was dumbing us all down, that was creating this identity politics situation and everything else that had been so corroded into the system, I think where we're at now, I'm quite hopeful. I actually sense a lot of fertility for ideas. I think the fact that this whole crew of people has come together, or whether we're independent or together, whatever you want to call it, the fact that there's such interest in all of this, I think is all good, and I see that as sort of a direct result of Trump just shaking up the system. That being said, does he lie all the time? Absolutely. Do I think they all lie all the time? Yeah. Did Obama lie about if you like your health doctor, you can keep it? Yeah, the Syria red line, blah, blah, blah. It's just Trump does a different series of lies and does them much more blatantly.
Well, it's worse.
So I almost view him as a necessary evil,
yeah.
I guess.
I can't give you that last thing on the scale of the line, because I think it's orders of magnitude worse. I mean, like not even just one order of magnitude worse. It's like 100-fold worse with Trump.
So, all right, so if you take those two, though, so if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. Obamacare obviously was his biggest public policy, domestic public policy thing. Yeah. So that's a pretty big lie, and they pretty much admitted that he knew he was saying it because he wanted to pass it.
Yeah, I mean, whether that was a lie or not, or whether he just reneged on a promise, or I mean, like the red line, I don't really view as a lie. I just view that as a failure of nerve. It's like he drew a red line that he probably shouldn't have drawn, because if he had thought about it, he knew he wasn't going to go to war over it. Right. And then he made us look weak because he didn't, you know, the line was crossed and we didn't respond. I think that was, but it's just, we were living in a world where you would have a whole news cycle over Obama wearing a tan suit, right? And now we're living in a world where a porn star can say, listen, you know, he's lying about this and I have evidence, and it's like, it's eclipsed by the next lie he tells by the end of that news cycle, right? So it's just, it's literally true to say that Obama's presidency would have been completely derailed by any one of maybe 100 things you could say Donald Trump has said or done in the last year. I mean, not even, I mean, way beyond 10 things. I mean, I can't list them now, but I mean, almost anything he does on a weekly basis, if not a daily basis, had you seen Obama do it in that period of the earth that we can
so
all
can you
dimly
give me
recollect?
one that you think would have really derailed an Obama presidency? Because to me, it was like the media was so far up his butt, he could have pretty much gotten away with anything. Well, I get what you're saying, that, yeah, they focused on tan suits and silly nonsense, but to me, I see that as almost like, it's because you guys weren't doing your job. You should have been digging a little bit more or whatever.
Well, no, but I think it's actually true to say that Obama was basically, as honest as a politician can be and still be a politician. I mean, I'm sure he lied about things, right? Yeah. But there's no story on Obama being just this depraved person behind closed doors who's a con artist who gets away with everything that he can get away with, who's trailing a long list of business and interpersonal casualties, who will tell you if you put them on camera or you get them privately that he's the worst person they've ever met, right? That's who's president now, right? It's just, it's a completely different personality. I think so whatever happens, let's say let's say we're living in a universe where having a uniquely narcissistic, selfish, shallow personality in this position of power works out well. Let's just say that. I mean, so let's just take your wrecking ball theory. He's kind of swung through here. Yeah. He's disrupted everything. You know, I do view him, as I've said before, as a kind of evil Chauncey Gardner character. I don't view him as this sort of master. I think Scott Adams is completely out to lunch on this. I don't think he's this genius manipulator. I mean, he's got some talents, obviously, right? But I think...
But you think it's much less calculated.
Much less calculated.
Certainly than Scott
I don't
says,
think him contradicting himself 2 sentences later, right, when he says, you know, this is an amazing letter, you'd all like to read this letter, and then he says 2 sentences later, I haven't read the letter.
Yeah.
That's not calculated. He's just not, doesn't have the, he can't take the cognitive overhead to even figure out what, you know, what was logically implied by the last thing he said, right? So he's not, the truth is, he's not, he lies all the time, but worse than lying, and this is the great distinction that the philosopher Harry Frankfurt made in his book On Bullshit, worse than lying is that he's bullshitting all the time. And the difference between lying and bullshitting is that if I'm going to lie to you, I'm paying attention to what I know, I know what is true, I know you know what is true, and I'm trying to insert a lie into the space provided in a way that you won't notice, right? Like I'm having to keep track of reality in order to lie to you successfully. I understand your logical expectations. I understand that if I tell you that, you know, I was an hour late here because the traffic was so bad, I can't say in the next sentence, oh, I left an hour late from my house, right? So like, so the bullshitter isn't doing any of that. The bullshitter is just talking, right? And therefore has renounced the reality testing he has to do to lie successfully. And he's just, he has, the burden is not on him to make any sense at all in the end. And that, to an amazing degree, not entirely, I think he does actually lie strategically sometimes, but to an amazing degree, and this is what I think is so harmful about his presidency, whatever happens with North Korea or anything else that we might, you know, care about, to an amazing degree, he has revealed that half of our society will accept somebody who is just bullshitting all the time about things great and small. I mean, it doesn't matter how important or how inconsequential. Porn stars, you know, what just happened with the G7, you know, what was said behind closed doors, what he's going to say to some maniac with nukes. There's just we've completely forsaken any expectation of a reality-based conversation, and many people seem to revel in it. Many people seem to think this is just good fun. This is like, you know, and it's a bit of the wrecking ball theory gone to some nihilistic extreme, where it's just, let's just burn it all down. You know, like there's just nothing. You know, there was nothing worth maintaining about our institutions, about our norms, about our traditions, about, you know, the expectations of other countries that are our allies. You know, like, who cares if all of our traditional allies don't know what to think about the president because he said one thing 5 minutes ago and he says the opposite thing now, and they're all left with their jaws on the floor, right? That's just comedy for, what, 40% of America. I think there's a real consequence to that, because what Trump has revealed is that there's a space for a truly terrible, calculating person, you know, like the sinister person with a real ideology, not just...
So you think someone potentially worse than him?
Oh,
really?
yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, we've proven to ourselves that literally anyone who can connect certain dots, I mean, anyone who can connect the dots of, you know, I'm not even sure what these dots are, but I mean, obviously Trump connected some of them, you know, fame and a certain kind of charisma, you know, a kind of populist, an ability to strike the populist note in a way that's compelling. Someone could be way worse and way smarter and have a very different agenda can become president. And I think that's, you know, I mean, it's good, perhaps it's good to know that, but it's just, I think we now know that about ourselves.
Yeah, is this then the weird, so I think you know that I'm certainly not a nihilist, and I'm definitely not somebody that wanted to burn the whole thing down, but I do view this reckoning as basically good as long as this other person doesn't magically appear out of it. And I also sense that the time of craziness that we're in right now, and this endless inability to have these honest conversations, and I agree with you on his basic management of truth, or whatever you want. Management of truth is an interesting phrase, but whatever that is, that I sense there is going to be a rebound towards sanity. that at some point you can't always have the wrecking ball, always have the guy that's flipping everything over and destroying it, and that if our institutions are strong enough, and if there's enough sane people out there, and enough people that are listening to thoughtful conversations, and I think we both agree there's a lot of people growing in that regard, that the next version of whatever happens at an election is going to come from something much saner.
Yeah, I don't see the evidence
saner
of that.
from before where we were before, because that's where we were just getting a lot of bullshit from the media and from everything else, that we might actually get a rebound into sanity. So you're not as hopeful.
No, because what I see is the Republican Party has been destroyed, right? The Republican Party has become Trump's party. It's just this populist, pandering, I mean, they're just all trying to figure out what to do in his wake, but nobody, I mean, there's no coherent platform anymore there. And as we've said, the left has swung into this insane, just victimology echo chamber of identity politics where everyone's a racist. Yeah. Right? So
I guess maybe that's sort of the root of where our little disconnect is on this, because I fear that much more. I think that thing that's happening on the left, this identity politics thing, I think that's the thing that could actually truly upend the entire American experiment. The idea that we would end up looking at each other only on these immutable characteristics and hiring each other only on these things and having quotas and ripping apart the good pieces of multiculturalism that we've done here better than anybody, and the melting pot that we've done better, it will cause us to all be horrifically suspicious of each other and angry at each other, really for no reason other than the way we look. And I'm not discounting anything you're saying about what's happening on the right, although I do see a streak of libertarianism on the right that I really like. I think there actually has been a rebirth. You know, a guy like Shapiro is obviously not a real Trump guy at heart, and he's arguing a lot of libertarian stuff that I like. I mean, maybe you don't like it as much, but I think it's a decent place to be arguing from. But I guess maybe that is where our little disconnect is on that. The thing on the left I view as much scarier. I think it's a much more of an immediate threat. And I say that knowing full well that Trump has the nuclear codes. So maybe that's a little...
Yeah, I mean, I think they're both enormous problems. I don't know which, you know, the Trump thing could seem fine until something horrific happens, right? So it's like, and, you know, it's just, it is in fact hard to know what's happening and what risks we're running. So it's like, you know, the economy seems to be doing good by what metric? By the stock market hasn't imploded, right? So, but
unemployment's low, consumer confidence is high, Black and Latino unemployment's really low. I mean,
right, but I mean, there are ways to parse all of those numbers that are less optimistic. So, you know, like the employment numbers are low because lots of people are just fallen out of the job surge. But, and the stock market, I think there's something like 8% of Americans are in the stock market. You know, it's like 92% of Americans are not even exposed to the stock market,
right?
Or at least directly. So those numbers could be a little off, but it's something like that. But all of that would change radically the moment something, you know, the left's worst fears about Trump are realized. And the moment he does something that just gets us far closer to obvious, you know, war, or actually into one, and it's clearly the wrong war. You know, the fact that, I mean, I think that the U.S. no longer stands, at least in the eyes of the world, the U.S. no longer stands for sanity on some fundamental questions of human values. I mean, like, you know, whether it's, you know, climate change and environmentalism and doing something sane with respect to that, or you know, human rights. I mean, he just took a meeting with perhaps the greatest human rights violator, certainly the current generation, and you know, it's just clear now that the U.S. will glad hand a dictator and say nothing about the fact that he's running a gulag system, and they have been for decades. That used to be unthinkable, and so that extinguishes a certain hope of kind of a moral high ground that the rest of the world, I think, rightly depended on us for. And given the current occupant of the Oval Office, you know, we've completely abandoned that.
Right.
So I think, but it's hard to price in those changes. I don't know what the consequences of all of that is.
Right. So I guess the part that still seems odd to me is, like, you know, when Obama ran, he said, you know, we have to sit down with these people. He said he wanted to sit down with Ahmadinejad, with no
Yeah.
prior discussions
Yeah.
or whatever. That's basically what Trump did here. Now, I'm not saying Trump's the right guy to do it. Maybe he is in some insane way, and maybe he isn't.
But in
Obama,
most of those cases, there would have been some lambasting of the person about human rights. You know, it's like, I mean, the standard, if it was Hillary Clinton doing any of these things,
Yeah.
at least you know there would be the norm of acknowledging that I mean, so I mean, you just compare what Trump said about Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, the statements were insane.
To what's actually going on. I mean, so we have someone who is presiding over the starvation and just, I mean, it's beyond Orwellian immiseration of his people. I mean, it's like if you are caught saying the wrong thing or passing the wrong book to your neighbor, or you tuned your radio to receive a broadcast from South Korea, you're sent to the gulag, and your progeny are sent to the gulag, and down to the third generation, right? I mean, that's the punishment for this. We have the President of the United States saying that he's a great guy, he's a intelligent guy, he loves his people. I mean, that's a verbatim quote. He loves his people. Yeah. I'm not surprised by that. I mean, it's like, well, I don't even know what. I mean, is there anyone in this country who? I mean, it's just like there's so many layers at which we have lost sight of reality here. That's like I don't know where the free fall stops. Like, on one level, there's a sense that he's lying, right? Like he's saying something he must know is untrue, right? So like he knows what's going on. He knows what life is like in North Korea. So he knows that to say that this man loves his people is a misrepresentation. But what do people actually think? I think it's there's another layer beyond that. No, he actually doesn't know that. Like, he's so ignorant of what's happening in the world that he's just talking, and there's just no burden on him to represent reality at all. Or there's a layer beyond that. It simply doesn't matter. Like the difference between those two things, lying and bullshitting, doesn't matter. And we're not even going to spend the nanosecond it takes to judge between them. And beyond that, we're not even going to notice that he said anything strange there. And that's kind of where most of the country is. It's like we now have someone in office who will say things that make absolutely no sense, and they are meant to map on the most consequential examples of human suffering in our time, right? And the most consequential risks we run as a civilization. We're talking about nuclear war here and the conversations that can be had to prevent it. And he's saying things that are not only just untrue and obscenely untrue, no one's even noticing. And no one's even noticing that no one's noticing. I mean, like, so this is like, I don't even know where we are now, but it's just like, I don't think there's a name for this, right? And
how many
I think that matters.
firewalls do you think we have until, if what you're saying is right, how many firewalls left are there before we're really in like some true dystopian, complete inability to communicate?
But let me just clarify here.
Yeah.
So I'm not even judging whether anything bad happened in Singapore. So it's totally possible that the evil Chauncey Gardner character could be the thing that successfully gets us to have a better relationship with North Korea.
So I think that's what Scott Adams would say.
That's possible. Yeah. I'm not saying I know that's impossible.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like a great bet to me. It's not the way I would. It's not, and even if it's possible, I don't think it's the best possible strategy. It'd be better to have someone who actually read the briefing books, knows the history of negotiations, knows the possibility that he's being duped, is paying attention to all of that, even while, let's say, playing like the madman, if in fact that's the right strategy in this game of chicken. So there's nothing optimal about this, but I'm just saying I'm not saying that my worrying about what's happening is not predicated on the claim that, oh, this whole thing with North Korea is going to be a disaster.
Right.
If it's successful, that still doesn't answer my primary concern about what we've done to ourselves in terms of our politics.
Yeah, so how do we negotiate those two things? Let's just say for a second that despite all the lies, I'm with you, he lies about absolutely everything, okay, despite all of this craziness and nonsense and all of that, that basically 4 years pass, let's say the economy's basically fine, we don't get into some extra intractable war, let's say something good comes out of the North Korea situation, basically things have been okay. You know, there isn't some massive terror attack or something.
I would say we've dodged many bullets, and that we got very lucky.
Yeah.
What's impossible to argue is that this is all a brilliant plan that has been thought through from the beginning on the part of Trump. I think there's just no evidence for that at all, right? It's not that he is deeply informed about world history and current events and all of the information one would think you would need to know to game this out at some genius level, you know, four-dimensional chess, right?
Right.
Or to follow the Scott Adams program, and so that's not happening. So, but we could live in a world where having someone who kind of fundamentally is just a reality TV show star thrust into this position of immense responsibility, we could live in a world where that can work out in surprising ways, or at least not cause some kind of disaster.
Yeah.
I hope we live in that world. I mean, I hope that he succeeds in every way we would want a president to succeed, and then I also hope he doesn't get reelected. You know, it's like I think it's still, it's obvious to me that we're paying an immense price, even if terrible things don't happen.
So if terrible things don't happen, and the left sort of continues with the track that I think we both see it's on,
right?
Could you possibly vote for one of those people? Like, would you feel that this could override every
well,
fear?
it depends who the person is and what the trade-offs are. I mean, I think, in my world, almost anyone would be better than Trump, but give me the sufficiently obnoxious choice on the left, and I could rethink that.
Yeah.